Welcome back. We're taking a closer look at the issue of black land loss. It was a form of economic oppression that deprived black families of the ability to build generational wealth. The recent settlement of Bruce's Beach in California has become one of the higher profile cases of black land loss. In 1912, a black couple purchased oceanfront land and built a resort that catered to black families, but the government seized it by eminent domain. The families claimed the land grab was motivated by racism. Well, last year, the government returned the land to the families' descendants, an effort to, quote, right the wrongs of the past, unquote. Ultimately, the Bruce family decided to sell the property back to the county for $20 million. Joining us now is Professor Thomas Mitchell. He's a property law scholar with Boston College Law School and part of the Land Loss and Reparations Project team at Boston College, which looked at property and census records over a 77-year period and determined that black farm families have been deprived of more than $300 billion in generational wealth due to land loss. Wow, that's a lot of money. Professor, if you would summarize some of the history here and how you came to that dollar figure.
Yeah, sure. So I think that many Americans know that the federal government reneged on its promise to do massive land reform and land redistribution.
Starting with the promise of 40 acres.
40 acres and a mule.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
But what's less known is that even after that promise was broken, between the end of the Civil War and 1910, 1920, African-American farm families acquired somewhere between 16 and 18 million acres of agricultural land in this country. Unfortunately, that land base has shrunk precipitously. According to the most recent USDA figures, African Americans own somewhere between 4 and 5 million acres of farmland. And so that's just one source. We look at some of the reasons for that loss. There was extra legal violence, lynchings, and intimidations. But you also had decades of systemic discrimination by the United States Department of Agriculture that was specifically targeting black farm families and trying to drive them off the land.
And how did that manifest itself?
So black farm families would try to access USDA benefits, USDA
bank loans,
loan programs. Sometimes they walked into the offices and they were told to leave. Sometimes.
And if they couldn't get the loans, they couldn't plant their crop.
They couldn't plant. Sometimes they were given the loans, but at the end of the planting season, when they were not going to be able to have a profitable crop, but they would have all these expenses, that was going to drive them into debt. So you had, that just went on for decades.
Or the loans were called early. All kinds of shenanigans.
Exactly. Or you would have natural disasters. White farm families were given relief from the government. Black farm families were not given relief. So.
And there's another piece of it too. Governments rationalized the seizing of land from black property owners as well.
Yes, I mean, there were assumptions that black property owners were not discriminated. They were just part of this economic wave of the consolidation of the farm sector into just larger farms. But the data, undercuts that. It shows that black farm families, if you correct for the size of the farm, were driven out of farming at a far higher rate than white farm families.
Now, Bruce's Beach received national attention. That family turned their property into a resort area, not a farm. But are there other situations like Bruce's Beach out there that we don't know about?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of examples. So, I mean, throughout this country. So, for example, a significant part of Central Park in New York City was an area where you had something like 200 plus black families owned property, owned homes in Central Park.
Seneca.
Yep, Seneca Village.
Seneca Village.
They were driven out. You have in there's just so many examples.
Another example in Palm Beach, West Palm.
Yeah, you have an example that I think was during World War II in North Carolina. There was black property owners, the U.S. government, the Pentagon said they needed their land for an airstrip they never used. So instead of returning the land to these families, they turned it over to a local municipality that didn't use it for anything, and then they turned it over to do it.
And carrying on through today, we see land taken by eminent domain for highway building.
Oh, that's been rampant.
Yeah, cutting through neighborhoods, black neighborhoods. So what are you hoping to accomplish with the initiative on land, housing, and property rights?
So there's a series of these issues that have impacted disproportionately black and brown communities, not exclusively, but disproportionately. Many of these issues had not been given any attention in the media, by academics, by policymakers. I think through our work in terms of this land loss and reparations research group, which is actually not based at BC, there's 5 of us researchers at different institutions that have collaborated on this. My work on so-called heirs property, which was something that was totally overlooked when I began my career, is to shine a light on these issues that I often think of have been undervalued, understudied, under-theorized, both in terms of just setting the historical record straight, but also by shining a light on the problem and the negative impact, both economic and non-economic, kind of sets the stage for actually then doing something about it in terms of reforming laws, developing policies that could have a meaningful impact on these communities.
Do you see any other Bruce's Beach type situations where land is going to be returned?
Yeah, I think, in some ways, Bruce's Beach is a little bit of a unicorn. If you look at the dynamics. First of all, the city of Manhattan Beach, where it's located, has never apologized. But that property got transferred to Los Angeles County that was just much more committed to righting that historical wrong. The property had not been turned over to a private developer. It had...
Who probably would have been less willing to turn it back over.
Yes, certainly. So, I don't want to give false hope that you're now going to have this, a large number of Bruce's Beach. But what's certainly true is before Bruce's Beach, nobody thought Bruce's Beach was possible.
Well, I got to tell you, Professor Thomas Mitchell, there is a lot to talk about here, and we hope you'll come back and give us an update on your progress.
Sure, be my pleasure. Thank you.
Professor Thomas Mitchell, thank you for joining us.